finally got your first leadership gig, loving the new role, but feeling the pressure of your new responsibilities and all that expectation to perform? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Crossing the chasm from a technical role to leadership, from doing stuff to managing and leading people, is the toughest challenge any leader must make. Welcome to the Human Edge Show, the podcast dedicated to help you do just that, successfully cross the doing to leading chasm. Campbell Such here, Chief Chasm Crossing Guide. I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. I want to help you learn those lessons much more easily by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have already figured it out. You'll get great actionable tips, strategies, and techniques to make the transition so much easier and faster for you. Now let's get to it. Roxanne, welcome to the Human Edge Show. It's awesome to have you on the show. What's something that not many people would know about you?
Well, I suppose the one thing that most people would know about me is that I like to make my own wine. I'm not very good at it yet, but I like to make my own wine. So one day, not too long from, my retirement, not that I'm about to retire, but, I am, as I got 50 this year, sort of start going, I'd love to have a winery someday and just, brew some wine. That's what I'd love to do.
Well, when I was going through university, one of the friends that I had in the group, her father made wine, and he made all sorts of fruit wine. It wasn't. I'm sure he made grape wine, but he had this amazing cellar with these pineapple wines and cherry wines, and we used to sample those. It was really interesting.
It's exactly how it started for me, because my father, I'm French Canadian, so of course, being French, my father, when he came to New Zealand and saw the absolute massive wine grape that I have got here on my fence, said no self-respecting French person has a grape like this and doesn't make wine. You have to make wine. So he bought me a starter kit, and I thought, okay, he said, it's very easy. You just throw that in, just let it ferment, and, you'll get wine. But actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. But over the years, I've done a prototype. I've got an MVP. And during COVID, I've sort of tried to perfect my technique. So I think my neighbors think that I've reached the bottom of the supermarket shelf. So I could possibly put it in a cask, but it is alcoholic, but still a lot of practice to be done. Yeah. But I really enjoy it.
And is there any particular variety of grape that you chose, or is it the one that was growing on your fence, and so that's the one that you?
It is the one that's been growing on my fence, which I believe it's probably about 60 or 70 years old. It produces a lot of grapes. So I did about 36 bottles last year. So, enough to keep you busy. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you what kind of grape it is. Yeah. It's a local West Auckland grape of some sort that would have fallen into Mount Albert. I'm not too sure.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And it's amazing, isn't it, when you first get into something, and leadership, that we're going to talk about today is one of those classic examples. It may look easy from the outside. And once you start delving into it, the layers that you can peel back of the onion to find the things that you didn't know is amazing. And
there's a bit more chemistry behind the scene. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Roxanne, just to step away from that, so I'm fascinated. I can see I'm going to have a glass of wine tonight, and perhaps we should be having. If this was a bit later in the day, we were doing the interview. Perhaps we should be having a glass of wine.
It is wine time somewhere in the world.
Yeah, that's right. Could you just take yourself back to your early days of leadership, your first foray into leadership, or your first steps into leadership, and how did that happen? What was the opportunity for you, and what were some of the things that you learnt, either that were really good things to know, or you learnt that were things that perhaps you knew at the time, or you found later that were great lessons and things not to do?
Yes, it's quite an interesting question, because if I go back, even from my early days of even when I was waitressing or, working at McDonald's, I did have a natural leadership style that basically sort of organically placed me into leadership position. So I guess you could say I didn't choose it, it chose me. But I can actually say now that I probably wasn't a very good leader at the time. I was probably more of a micromanager than a leader. And I think it's because of all this, the responsibility that are placed on you to run something and the expectations of delivering results when you haven't got the tools yet to lead people. You sort of know what the job is yourself, but when you're in charge of a team, you can't do the job for them. So you need to learn to delegate and provide to them. And I think what I've realized throughout my career as I get older and wiser now is that probably the first few leadership roles that I've had, I was probably a micromanager from hell, I suspect. And I think I remember quite vividly that over the time, didn't get great direction, didn't get good feedback. I was sort of really pushed on delivery, but less around the people management. And I think I've had some great mentors and coaches over the years. And also, to be fair, Campbell, I think one day I realized how my style was when I was faced with a micromanager myself. And I felt what it was like to be under micromanagement. And I thought to myself, never again. Now that I know how it feels, I never want to feel like that again, but I also never want anybody to feel like that under me. Yeah. So there was a big moment for me in my career when I realized what was not quite working in my style and what I needed to do about it. And it's a lot of unlearning at that point. It's a lot of self-awareness and understanding your reaction or your actions on other people and how they will react. Some people will let you know, some people won't tell you. So I think in my journey, I think today it is something that I've always been very conscious about. I'm definitely now more of a delegated leader, not to the point where I don't actually do anything, but actually with what I call delegation with great outcomes, clarified outcomes, right? So I'm clear about what I'm looking for. How you get there is up to you. You may fail, you may not, but I think it's certainly, I think in my leadership now with age and experiences, it's probably better. I suppose the best reflection I've had is I wished I had a lot of my mentors and coaches then, at the time when you're starting your leadership career to get the right level of direction, as opposed to having it so much later in life. When you go, gosh, I wish you would have told that 10 years ago. It would have made probably life for a lot of people a lot better. But, it's a continuous journey of learning. And I think now I'm really proud of where I sit now. And I think my team is amazing. And I've learned how to build good teams and engage them and empower them. And so I feel better. But I guess if I reflect, you almost had to go somewhere to realize where you are today. And I think for all the wrongs then, it actually helped me put it right. Yeah. And so that's a bit of where my leadership journey is at. And I'm sure I've got plenty more to learn from.
Yeah, well, that's great. I have a great belief that lifelong learning is one of the most important things. Curiosity in life, which drives lifelong learning, is a superpower that a lot of us, if we really want to succeed and live a whole full life and enjoy ourselves as well as feel a sense of accomplishment, then that ongoing ability to learn. As soon as you stop learning, you're really starting to go the other way, right?
That's right.
You end up in arrogance instead of humbleness, and there's a whole bunch of bad stuff that comes with that. I know it all. And we know plenty of know-it-alls, right?
And it's being open to listening to feedback, because the feedback is there, but whether you receive it or not, whether you understand it at that point or not. So sometimes you'll get the feedback, you won't agree with it. You're not at the point where you receive gracefully feedback, and you think you got it and you know it all, especially when you're younger, because it doesn't make sense to you then. But later on in life, it makes sense to you. And then you go, wow, okay. When I look back at all these key points in my career and I go, I was more of I got really good at my trade and my craft. So I knew my topics quite well. So I was more of what you call a technical leader, or a knowledge leader. The more I knew, the more it made me powerful. But of course, by then we thought knowledge is power, right? Until I met some very good people leader who said, there's people who lead through knowledge and there's people who lead through people. And, you have a lot of knowledge, but you need to lead through people. And the day I shifted to leading via people as opposed to knowledge and being happy to be the dumbest person in the room, actually. But it takes a certain level of confidence to be able to get there, because I think we are trained in the younger days to know a lot. So if we know a lot, we naturally take lead. But actually, it's actually not about that. It's about learning to work with people and empowering people. And that's what makes you a much more powerful leader than actually a manager, Yeah. So, learn a lot. But, key things that now I try to pass on to people I mentor at a younger age, even if it doesn't make sense to them right now, one day it will. And when it does click, it makes them a much better leader.
Yeah. There's a saying that when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And perhaps it's kind of not necessarily just a person will appear, but that the messages that you've received in the past that were kind of like faded and weren't really making sense to you suddenly step into clarity, and then it's like, oh gosh, yes, they're absolutely right, but you weren't ready for that message at the time. So how do you go about, because if you're, one of the things that you talked about just before was that early on you were a micromanager, and that was now that you've seen what it's like to be under a micromanager, how challenging that is. How do you go about helping someone that you've put into a role, in a new leadership role, make that transition from a technical role where they, it's all about what you know and delivering day in, day out as the best player on the team? How do you then deliver messages to them that help them see that the knowledge path isn't necessarily the best way to leadership, and actually ultimately leadership's about leadership and management, and they're different things, is sort of working things through other people, not through micromanaging, making stuff happen. How do you help people see that?
So, gosh, we could talk for hours on this. So I think one of the key things is that resonates with me is that I've always been told, why are you hiring people if you're doing their job?
Yeah.
What a waste of two people's time. So if you're going to do somebody else's job, then you shouldn't have that person in there. But it's also, as a leader, especially in your younger days when you're a manager of a team, so you don't necessarily manage people leader, but you manage a team, then you might be a little bit more directional in terms of what you're looking for, because you're much more of a vertical leader, right? You're not a T-shaped leader. So again, it's going to be in a specialization, and you need to be functionally good. But it's also about ensuring that as leaders of people leader, we need to put the right people in place. Not everybody's a good leader. Right? It's not because you're very technically savvy or capable that you've got the soft skills to be able to empower people. And I think the job that we need to do is making sure that when we put people in those positions, that they have the right skill set or capabilities for it. Because some people they might want to be leaders, but they just haven't got the tool sets or the right capability to do so. And so you might want to train them and put them through adaptive leadership classes, but I think you do them a disfavor by putting them in a position where it's just not their natural nature to be able to run a group. Their nature is to be the the topic expert, and it's probably better for them to stay at that position and be more of an influencer than a leader.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be quite bold as leaders to make those calls, because we're just doing a disservice to their team. We're doing a disservice to ourselves, because it makes our job a lot harder. And so for me, first and foremost is be clear about who's got the right skill sets and capability to lead people. And if they are able to do so, then what are the other complementary skill set within their team that will make them a unit, right? Because a leader is just one person, but ultimately it's about the team composition. If I look at my leadership team, I'm certainly not the most knowledgeable in my lead team, but I have a team that complements me. And that's really important, because my job is so much more easier if I get the right people in place and they can actually lead their team to actually have the right people in place. It all scales down, right?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I'd say that any leader who puts the wrong person in the wrong place is doing a disfavor on all front. And if the person has the right skill, but it's lacking the experiences, then that's easier because you can coach them into it, right? You can say, hey, look, and be able to give clear feedback. This is something that's frustrated me over the years, is that a lot of people have skill set and capabilities, but lack that sort of expertise or, time in the field or in the trenches. And as a leader of that person, you need to be able to step in to say, hey, look, when you did this, possibly this could have looked a little bit better if you tackled it that way, or if you considered that. And sometimes it's quite confronting. You will have some very strong people, very strong personalities, and they don't realize that what they're doing is actually damaging other people because people are scared of telling them. But by you not stepping in and being a leader and saying, hey, let me help you, give you the tools to make this better, to improve, how are they supposed to get better? Yeah. I see so many people shying away from providing clear feedback. It's just not helpful. And actually, you know what? As the person receiving the feedback, you may not like it straight away because it's a bit of a window in something that you may have been told before, but you choose to ignore. But actually, down the track, it will serve you 1,000 times more, because I wasn't ready to receive feedback of things that I possibly wasn't clear I was doing. But after receiving it a few times, I realized, actually, I need to listen to this feedback because that's what's catching me up. And so when I actually took it in, I could do something about it. But if nobody tells me, how are you supposed to get better? So I think these are key things as leaders, is being bold enough to give clear feedback and also a way to get out of it. So what do I do? Now that you're telling me this, tell me how I can get better at it. Don't leave me hanging, Don't say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, Help me and then keep me accountable for it. And I think this means that we build better leaders, because it's not because you're a leader or a manager that the job is done, right? Put you in charge of somebody. See you later. No, that's where the job starts for us, really. Yeah. My job as a leader is to grow more leaders, not to do the job for them or to actually mingle into their affairs. If I've put the right person in place to do the job, then my job is to support them and enable them, take the blockers out and grow them. Yeah. That's my job. And if I do that well and I point well, the rest solves itself.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And by doing so, not only are your leaders that you're helping to grow, you're growing too, because you're learning things about how you help them. Can we just I'd like to go back to feedback, because feedback's one of those really challenging things that if we're not ready for it, we may not hear it. But any feedback that's negative tends to be, certainly in my experience and with a lot of people I talk to, challenging to receive, because we like to think our weaknesses aren't there or that no one can see them. And when we get that feedback, even if it's with great intent by the person giving it, it still stings. And I've had that my whole career. But one of the things that I've tried to do is to go, okay, well, there may be something in here, and that's the curiosity piece. It doesn't necessarily make it easy to receive. And it sounds like you, having received it a few times, got that. One of the interesting things, a gem that I got from a previous guest on the show, Derek Wilson, was about feedback as a gift. And he had a mentor who went through this process of wrapping up had a present wrapped up and gave it to him and said, here's your gift. And what's the gift? Well, the gift's the feedback. And I thought it was a great analogy, a great metaphor for how you can take feedback. And you're not going to give the gift back. You can unwrap it and you're going to see what it is and see how it might help you. So what do you do to help? Oh, and there's another piece to that one too, is that you, as a leader, you're always being watched. And if there's a disconnect between what you say and what you do will always be believed over what you say. And so modeling behavior is really important as well. And that ability for you, when your direct reports and others around you see you receiving feedback and how you react, is a big piece of it as well. So how do you model feedback and the process so that it helps others see it? And what do you find? So for a leader of leaders who's trying to give feedback to someone else, or even a leader of a team who's trying to give feedback to their team who might be resisting it, what are some ideas that might help make that process a little easier and a little bit less confrontational and more likely to be picked up by the person it's intended for? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, well, I think over the years, there's been a few exercises that I think have been quite powerful. One of them is Patrick Lencioni. the gift of feedback. So there's a particular exercise where everybody writes something they really love about you and something that you could do better. And then that's all wrapped up, and then basically you can actually have it read to you or given to you. And when you see 6 or 7 or 8 people telling you something similar, it's quite hard to deny that it's not happening. So I found that doing that sort of exercise in terms of the level of trust in a group works quite well. I think the other thing as well is, and again, something I was not possibly open to when I was, in my early sort of leadership days, but being a vulnerable leader means so much more to me today than what it did then, because, and maybe as a woman as well, because we tend to work twice as hard to prove ourselves and to always explain why we deserve this position and so forth. So we grow quite a thick skin around making sure we don't show any vulnerability and that we're the right people for the job. And in actual fact is the opposite. And I'm actually learning this now. It's only in the last few years to go, you know what? I actually don't have the answer to that. Or no, I didn't do that so well. And here's what I've learned, and this is what I'm doing about it. Where before I would have seen as a show of weakness, right? But to be able to share that with your own team, to show your vulnerabilities and the thing that you're not very good at, but also to allow your team to give you feedback. Now, a lot of them won't because they're very scared about giving you the feedback, but you may get 1 or 2 that does. And you say, look, I can only be a good leader to you if I'm giving you what you need. Can you tell me of things that I could do better for you? And it's always how you present that feedback, in a positive way. And then say, look, I might not like what you're going to tell me, and that's okay, but that's for me to work on, because how can I improve if I don't know if I'm doing something to you that is not helping you, right? And you might have the 1 or 2 leaders that might actually tell you what you're doing. And you go, thank you for telling me that. And now I need you to help me, because if I don't change or if I keep doing it, I need you to let me know, right? Because I'm going to check in with you. So I'm as accountable as they are. It only takes 1 or 2 because they talk to each other. And I'll say, you know what, it wasn't that scary and it wasn't that bad. And having what I've done with my team, for instance, in the last few years is having those open monthly, what I call adaptive leader session, just us. And that's just us as a team talking about the things that are working and that are not working. And these are non-negotiable, because it's not, the work is the work. But if we don't work on us and our interactions, then we'll never be powerful in the work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the people stuff is always the things that go off the rail when you get busy, and we all get busy. So the people stuff is like, for me, it's like, no, it's not negotiable. You have to be there. It's compulsory. And actually the team feels better about it. And I participate. I don't just sit there and listen. I actually participate, and I share my vulnerability. And that opens up what we call a psychological safe environment, because if I'm being vulnerable and sharing something that I didn't do so well, like being a micromanager, having imposter syndrome when I got my first exec role, right? And that's okay. I don't need to be perfect. What I need to do is be recognizing what your weaknesses are and what you want the team to help you with. And then they get open, and then they get open with their own people. And so for me, it's like a contagious part. So being open to feedback, therefore, in a way that it's nice and easy, knowingly that you might not like what you're going to get, and practicing that on a regular basis makes it more comfortable. And that means that then I know that for them as leaders, they're going to feel more comfortable not being perfect and being able to open to their teams as well. And for me, it's like it's the gift of feedback, right? It's paying it forward. The more you invest into them, not all of them are going to be the best leaders, but they're going to keep pushing that down. And that's the same message that keeps growing up.
Yeah.
And I found that that's the best way. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Do it often, you will get better at it. And that's, the best advice I can give today is don't be afraid of it. It hurts at the start, but you get used to it.
Yeah. Yes, and it also so you're modeling great behavior that then ripples down through the organization. There's absolutely no doubt that culture starts at the top and works as well. The things it's ultimately the leader that drives all of that stuff. And if it's not working at the top, it's not going to work on the way
it's
down.
like parents and kids, right? It's always the parents, not the kids.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. But what I really like about that is that I like the words that you used. Here's what I'm not happy with what I did. I've recognized that, and here's what I'm doing about it. That you're putting out to your team of reports, whether they're a team that's directly doing stuff, or in your case, far more likely a team of leaders who are leading other leaders or leading teams themselves. But it gives those people a chance to see, oh, well, hey, if that's the case, then I can, maybe I can be a bit more like that. You've taken the feedback really well. And it also means that not only it's going to ripple down, but it may also come back up again as well. So they're far more open to admitting their mistakes and the issues that they have with you, rather than trying to cover them up and seeing them as weaknesses, which is really powerful. Then it makes it far more visible right through the organization of what's going on, and you're much more likely to know what's truly going on, rather than the story that you might be being fed by people who are too fearful to say what they really think.
Yeah. And I think, Campbell, as well, one of the key aspects that I remember an old boss of mine gave me, which I thought was amazing, was I always tell them that, remember, I'm only one person's opinion, right?
Yeah.
It's not because I'm your boss that it means everything. I'm looking at it from my perspective and my experiences. So take it as a grain of salt, because my opinion is only one. But if you hear this on a constant basis, then you'll know that perhaps this is something you need to look into. Because one person's opinion doesn't necessarily determine your outcome, right? So I always say to them, again, it's for what I've seen and what I've done. Or, you know what? I used to be that myself, and here's what I've done. Because I've had some great coaches in my life, which have actually given me some great tips, I share that back with them and show them that I've been through that same path. And then ultimately, as leaders, we pretty much follow a very similar path, right? We might work in different organization or different topic, but leadership is leadership. And so here's what I've learned from it, and that's what I suggest you try. Now, take it as you come. I'm not going to mark you on it or anything. It's advice. You take it, you don't. It makes sense to you today. It doesn't. That's fine. Maybe someday it will. But I'd be remiss to not give it to you if I see it, because I would have loved for someone to give it to me when I needed it. So I'm giving you the gift of feedback, but again, from one person's perspective. So, take it as you will.
So is that something, Roxanne, that if you think about a person that's gone into a new leadership role, probably out of a technical role, and their boss, the leader that's put them into that role, wants them to succeed, because presumably you put them in that role because you want them to succeed. What are the things what would you suggest to that leader that they focus on to help that new leader make that transition out of that technical role into leading people, knowing that they've come from a technical role and that they've still got a high degree of skill and knowledge in that space, probably going to struggle to let go and see other people, well, I can do it better than them, so I'm going to do it. How do you help that leader of leaders, or what would you say to a leader of leaders to help that new person step more easily into the role?
Yeah, so I see this a lot, especially at Southern Cross at the moment. What we try to do is grow our leaders. So if you hire well from the bottom up, then you obviously then grow their capability. They've got the right skill set and capabilities, just a chance of bringing them up, but they're quite green when they get there. Yeah. So a lot of it is look, whilst you don't have the experience of these situations, let me help you type thing. So they'll tend to be a lot in the weeds. And also we have to look at what level they're at. Sometimes, if I look at my level, I can't expect them to have the same sort of level of experiences that I've got, because it took me a long time to get this, right? I've got to always remember the shoes you used to fill at that level, right? So my expectation of my direct report is very different than their direct reports, because they're still in that learning journey. So I've got to remember what it was like at that level. So a lot of it is about, okay, so you've just gone from first people leader management type role. So first and foremost at that level is about how can you be more inspirational? How do you let go of being in the weeds, or what we call the dance floor, and get up on the balcony, right? So right now you're on the dance floor. I need you to get on the balcony, because when you're on the balcony, you can actually see what's going on. Because now you're that person who needs to tell me what's happening, not go dance down the bottom, right? And so at that level, you want them to practice the things that make sense for that level. As they move up to the people leader of leaders, then that's a little bit different. We say to them, well, now you've been quite functional, right? So you know lots of things in your category, but now you've got other leaders that are different categories you haven't managed before. So your role is not to try to learn everything they're doing. It's about bringing your team into a cohesion. So more about leadership understanding and empowerment than functional. So what I call system creators. Now you need to create a system to solve the problem, not try to solve the problem, right? So you're a system creator. What's the system you're going to put in place for this not to happen again, right? So that your team can then implement that system and then get better things out of it. So each level, you need to be clear about what where they're at in their experiences, and also what the expectation on them is, because you can't expect them to be the best leader tomorrow morning. You need to let them get through the experiences to actually get there, and just assist them when they need it, but coach them through it, and, be realistic about what, they're going to make mistakes, and that's fine, and don't make them, it's okay. You say, look, what do you think is going to happen? Okay, go through it and then come back and talk to me. And then they go, oh, wow, this happened. And you go, that's right. So what have you learned from that?
Yeah.
So what are you not going to do next time? Not obviously making sure it's not dangerous or anything like that, but giving them the space to learn. And maybe because of, as a parent as well, I've got teenagers coming out of teenage years now. There's a good thing that my father always reminded me of is you can't control them, you can only manage them. Mm. And that's the key thing, is what are the boundaries here, and fill your boots within that. If you're not sure, come back, but these are your boundaries. Don't go over that. Or if you want to go over that, come and talk to me. But if not, it's just about me giving you the support and the insight to keep going and learn on your own. You're going to have to fall on your face a little bit to get there. And it's okay. You need those experiences to become the leader you're going to need to be at each level. But we can't prevent people from going through those experiences, because or else you don't get to this level with having none of these experiences. Yeah. You shouldn't anyways.
Well, experiences the stuff you learn. What's the saying? Experience is what you get when you don't get what you wanted. And well, I may have completely messed that one up, but effectively it's when things go wrong, that's when you learn the most, right? And I guess the challenge then is as the person going through it, are they seeing it themselves, or is their leader, their manager, who's ever sort of around them, helping them to see that, hey, this is just something you're going through and here's some things to think about, as opposed to you can't afford to fail, in which case it's a whole different environment, right? So building that safety for people to be able to make mistakes, and we go, oh no, you can't make mistakes. Well, that's how I felt often. But everyone, if you're not learning, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. You don't want to keep making the same mistake, and so it's that kind of balance between the environment where you can push forward and stub your toe or trip over and fall flat on your face, but then pick yourself up and know that you haven't got someone beating you with a stick because of the mistake you made. Right?
And again, if you appoint well and you've got the right person in that role, a lot of it is just about growing their confidence.
Yeah.
They have the answer. They're just not quite sure if they should, Yeah. They go, but, it's like, no, you've got it. You already instinctively got it. Do it. I'm supporting you to it, it's just giving them the freedom to go for what they believe is the right thing, which is usually the right thing. They just need that reassurance that what they're about to try is okay. And you go, yeah, go for it. And so that's what I find mostly in my younger leaders, is just being confident and keep practicing. I said, you don't ride a bike first time. You're going to have to fail a few times before you feel confident, so just go for it. Practice, as long as it doesn't affect somebody's life, or just keep going at it, and you'll get there. And I think when they feel that they have that support and that confidence that they can try things, they'll go for it, and they'll keep you up to date on it, and then you can just sort of work with them alongside that. So I think that's ultimately, if we all do that, we create such better leaders, that they can grow New Zealand as a whole, So, and God knows we need good leaders.
Yeah, we do, don't we? I've
seen a lot of bad leaders. I've seen some really good ones. And I tell you what, I would work any day on the good leaders.
Yeah, that's right. And it is interesting though, because when I don't know what your career has been like with the people that you've been reporting to, but I'll bet there's been a mix of good and bad leaders. And it's for me, when I look back, it's a bit of a toss up as to whether I've learnt the most off the great leaders or the most off the worst leaders. I've certainly learnt things off both.
It's a really good, actually, you've got a really good point there. It's a good one to think about, because I think it's probably a 50-50, right? So you want to do more of the leaders that made you feel like you just jump out of bed every day and you just love being at work, and other leaders where you know everything you will never be as a leader.
Yes, that's it.
And you should never forget. I think every time, never forget how it felt, because that's exactly what you might do to others. So that's a really key for me, is never stop remembering what it felt like. Even from talking to a big boss in the elevator, how nervous you are, and muddling all your words. And I can see it in the young ones. And instead of, laughing about it, it's just making them feel good about it. It's okay, it's never forget. That's the key, I think. That's what makes you a better leader, you know?
Yes, that's right. It's that's really powerful. Roxanne, you've spoken a few times about making sure you have the right people in leadership roles. My experience with that is that, and if you look at the research, say out of Gallup, the percentage of people that make great leaders is small, maybe 10% max, and there's another couple of out of maybe another 20% who, with the right coaching and support and mentorship and training, can be good leaders. How do you? And then the rest of the other 70% of people, if they end up in a leadership role, are probably going to, at best, struggle with it and maybe hate it, and end up massively stressed in their lives, and really, no matter what they think they should be doing, shouldn't be in a leadership role. How do you go about identifying those people that are best suited for leadership and those that are perhaps more ideally suited to be technical experts, and to provide a pathway for people to make objective decisions around which is the best path for them? What's your process? First of all, to identify the people to give a leadership opportunity to, and then to help those others focus perhaps on a more technical role.
It's a good question, actually. Someone asked me that question not too long ago. I said two things. One, I've hired really poorly in the past, and you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than having made the wrong choice and having to live with it and having to manage that through. And then you learn not to do that again, and then you might do that again a few more times down the track. So over time, I've realized, maybe I got better at it, at picking out the right people. What's the secret recipe today? Someone asked me the other day, how do you know? And I said, I don't know that I could state outright what it is. Maybe it's my experience, because I've worked in sales and I've worked in, the product management side, and I've worked on strategy, and I got to know a lot of people. I don't know that I've got a list particularly, but there's certain aspects of some people that I can pick up. And it's really about their ability to influence, their ability to, the way people perceive them, their logical thinking. It's mostly I look at their skills and capability, less knowledge. And I think, what impact do these people have on others? What impact do they have on me? And are they interested in leadership positions? And it's a little bit of that. So I've seen some people, like even when I started at Southern Cross, straight away I could see different interaction, and I think, wow, this person is quite impressive, but yet not in a leadership role. And so having those conversations, sometimes having a coffee with that person and prying a little bit more into, do you want to be a leader? Is that something that's of interest to you? Is it an opportunity nobody offered you before? Or is it something that, sometimes some people are great, but they really don't want to work with people?
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of, don't look at just the surface, but I tend to have a coffee, or I'll have a further discussion with them and just see where the experience is at. How do they respond to things? How good are they in storytelling? And then it's just getting a bit more information, a bit of a 360 about them. And that tells me usually, do they have what it takes in terms of those core ingredients? Are they good influencers, storytellers? Sometimes we get it wrong still. The higher you go, the more people are great at hiding their flaws, perhaps. So I'm still learning today. But in general, I tend to rely on this little hair in the back of my neck that says that's the one. And I don't know why. I can't explain to you. But in general, at the moment, it hasn't let me down in the last few years of being able to pick talent. And it's perhaps because I've seen the ones who have not been so great, and those traits are more identifiable. Yeah. So if I see those, I think probably not. But usually it's the soft skills that I look for. Because I think that's what people buy into. I'm all about the people. And so for me, as a leader, that's what I look for. Because I know that people make a difference. And you go and get the technical people that you need around you to give you that expertise. But first and foremost, you need people leaders.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, if to go into leadership and management, it really has to be about people, because ultimately that's what it is, right? And the higher you go, the less technical stuff you're doing. Although it doesn't necessarily mean that your technical knowledge and skills are of no use anymore, because they can help you to make sure you can see through the fog that might be presented to you, or the mist, or when people are trying to tell you stories that may not be quite right.
And in general, if you talk long enough with them, they'll give you enough signals to tell you whether they've got it or not. They're open to feedback. Are they vulnerable? Do they know where they're at? Are they self-aware? There's a lot of little criteria there that just come to mind as we're talking, that usually will give you the red flags or not as to whether or not they'll have the right things to be a good leader. So, yeah.
Do you have any thought? You said you kind of, I can't remember exactly the way you put it, but that leadership found you, I think was what you said. For someone who's contemplating a leadership role, who's in a technical role at the moment, and let's assume they're either heading in that direction, but they've got a really good sense of, or a good set of skills in the technical space. How would you advise them to consider whether leadership is right for them, as opposed to maybe going into some kind of senior technical role that might be available to them in the industry or in the organization?
Well, first of all, I would say to them, don't worry about the fact that you're technical or not, because it's got nothing to do with it. It's about, have you got the people skills? Yeah. So when you walk into a room, are you able to influence people? Do they tend to listen to you? Are you able to, convey messages? Are you able to influence change? Because ultimately, great leaders are inspirational leaders. They influence change. They're not good managers. They're inspirational leaders. So, are you self-aware? Can you see the impact on others? Do they tend to follow you? Do they tend to come and ask you questions? Are you able to relate with most people or adapt to the different personalities or different areas? Because it's not just in your technology. When you're a people leader, it's about your peers that you influence, but also how you influence your management. So do you tend to form natural relationship with other key stakeholders, right, in the business? Or do you tend to stay in your own zone? So these are criteria that if you tend to be able to, you're able to pick up the phone or, make a meetings with someone to say, let's go in for a coffee. Being able to, because especially in technology, you need to be able to get out of that shell sometime and be able to relate to different areas that are not technology focused. So are you able to translate what you're trying to say in a way that others can understand? Yes. So for me, these are all key aspects that when you have people, that matters a lot. They don't care about, because you can have all the technical knowledge in the world, but if you can't communicate and translate that, it means nothing. You're not going to take people on a journey. They're not going to follow you. And ultimately, they'll stop listening to what you tell them, no matter how good of a knowledge you've got. So knowledge for me around the technology's got nothing to do with it. It's about, are you conscious of the impact you have on others, and is it positive? Because if it is, then definitely come and talk to me. I've got plenty of roles for you.
Yeah, well, that's a really key piece, is to look at yourself and ask yourself that question. And then I guess one of the things that we tend to assume is that extroverts make great leaders and introverts don't. But my experience with it is that that's not true at all, and that actually doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Well, in some ways, it can even go the other way, that introverts can make better leaders because they tend to listen, whereas extroverts tend to talk. And you don't learn too many things by talking. You learn a lot by listening and observing. So just because you're an introvert, don't take that as being a reason not to seek a role in leadership. Do you think there's anything in that, Roxanne? Or
it's a really great question, Campbell, because I know I was seeing on LinkedIn the other day, there's a great debate on LinkedIn about this. And as an extrovert myself, not having grown in technology, you can imagine that when I was appointed as a CDO, taking on the technology department, I thought, oh my God, how are they going to receive me? Am I going to be able to relate to them? But in actual fact, it works perfectly well. I think introverts, the difference with introvert is that they tend to think internally, and then they'll mull over the idea and then come out with like gold, right?
Yeah.
And the extrovert, we speak very quickly and we think after. So to your point, one is not better than the other. But as a leader, you need to be quite conscious of the impact you have on others. So if you're confronted at a leadership table with multiple different personalities, you need to be able to adapt. So if you're an extrovert like me who tends to speak up front, you might need to be pulled back a bit to give the room some time to assess. So my big work on is speak last, right, as an extrovert. Yeah. But if you're an introvert, which I have some in my team, it might be that you need to make sure that you do speak at the start, just to be heard, to make sure people know you're there, and then do something at the end.
Yeah.
Because the danger of an introvert is not speaking at all, and then 2 days later it's too late. Yeah. So people want to hear from you today. They want some direction. Even if you haven't formed the idea, you might say, look, I'd like to take a day to think about it and come back to you guys, just to make sure that you're not changing who you are, but you need to signal that you need more time. Mm-hmm. Because silence is also quite dangerous for an introvert. Silence is acceptance or lack of participation or lack of caring. So you need to be aware of that. And that's where that self-awareness comes in. Yeah. So what do I need to say with this audience? How present do I need to be? Yeah. But it goes the other way with the extrovert, right? Yeah. Sometimes we just need to zip it.
That's really powerful stuff. And and the reason I asked that question is because I'm naturally introverted, although most people wouldn't believe that when they look at me, but I am, and I tend to process and then talk, whereas it's the other way around with extroverts tend to talk and think as they're talking. That's just one of the different ways of doing it. And you mentioned gold before. The people, the direct reports that have been really introverted in my teams, you've got to let them think. And just be okay with the silence. And that's something perhaps really important for a leader to recognize, is that introverts do need some space to think. So don't expect at a table that they're all going to give you what you need. And maybe you need to be overtly cognizant of it and make it visible at the meeting that, if you need some time to think, let us know, or that so that you get the broad base input, not just the extroverts talking and the introverts thinking, And then the other piece of it, of course, is that what tends to be said first is the way the group tends to go. So you've got to be really careful about groupthink too. So that's really interesting. Roxanne, that's right. We could talk for a long time, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff I'd love to ask you. So maybe we'll get you back on the show again at some point. Just before we wrap up, is there anything else that I haven't asked you that I should have, or any last thoughts or comments or ideas that you have that you think might be really helpful to a new leader stepping into a role, or their manager putting someone in a new role that might help them succeed more quickly and easily?
Look, I think a lot of it we probably talked about, and I think it's about people giving themselves the chance to experience and to learn, not to put too much expectations on themselves or their people straight up the bat, and just taking themselves on a journey and consistently checking in. Check yourself in, just make sure, and go and find the mentors and the people that you like their leadership style, people you identify to and you go, God, that person is such a great leader. Go and have a coffee with them and, pick the behaviors and the things that you like about those leaders and make them their own, steal with pride. Because I think that's how you form yourself and give yourself a chance to learn. You might try something one day and it didn't work so well, but try it again. And if it doesn't work, then let it go and try something new. But never stop trying, because all of that forms who you become as a leader. Yeah. And you have a much clearer picture down the track, and don't expect that picture to be up front, right? Over time, experience and all that, you know who you are as a leader then. But you need to give yourself a chance and just be open about that. People don't expect you to be perfect from day dot. I think we put a lot more pressure on ourselves as leaders thinking, oh my God, I'm a leader now, I've got to be perfect. Actually, you don't. It's okay. You're there to learn just like everybody else. You just got an extra skill and capability to translate and empower people and inspire. So, you've been chosen to do that role. So to do it well, it means that you need to practice, and you need to practice with your team and be open with it. And the next thing is hire well. My God, the one single thing I've ever heard I've learned is hire well. That will save a whole lot of trouble in your life.
Roxanne, that's been fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been really enjoyed chatting, and we'll look forward to the next catch up. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Campbell.
Okay.
Great to be there.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you have a friend or a colleague who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. If you have a friend or a colleague who would not benefit, but you haven't been in touch with them for a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and to help me create the show that's most useful for you. And if you're frustrated or having challenges or would like some help, guidance, assistance with your first leadership role, then check out integrationcatalyst.com in the link in the podcast notes below. Or pass this on to your boss to nudge them to get you the help you really need to cross the doing to managing chasm and get you powered up on your leadership and management journey. Oh, and if you want to make sure you don't miss an episode, hit subscribe. Until next time.